It's easy with City Drugstore's curbside pickup. WhatsApp our certified pharmacist at 662-8769 with your requests. For prescriptions, take a clear photograph and send for review. We will engage you in dialogue and then provide a quotation and link for payment. You can then pay via TDC's online payment portal. And once the transaction is complete, you'll be notified that your pickup is ready. Yes, it's that easy. Send your WhatsApp message to 662-8769 to order your medications today with City Drugstore's curbside pickup service.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Financial Services. We're here for you to help you make your dreams come true. Whether your needs are big or small, we'll support you with them all. TDC Financial Services. We are strong. TDC Financial Services. This is where you belong.
TDC Financial Services, where money is made easy.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Good morning. This is Inside the News right here on WINN FM 98.9. I'm your host for today, Devon Cornelius. Let me apologize for the late start this morning, but we're going to get the show on the road. Today we will be looking at the OAS, the Organization of American States Preliminary Election Observation Mission Report that was provided last week on the recently concluded St. Nevis general elections, the National Assembly elections, where the OAS gave a number of findings and recommendations from the general elections held Friday, August 5th. We have on the panel with us today Kieran Murdoch of Antigua Observer Radio and German Abel, a journalist here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and Jihan Williams should be joining us shortly. But we're going to get the discussion on the road as we are a bit behind time. Again, let me apologize for the late start. Kieran and German, they are joining us via Zoom. Good morning, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me. This is Kieran speaking. I hope I'm coming through loud and clear.
Yes, I can hear you. German, are you hearing us?
I believe he is still, from what I'm seeing on the Zoom here, he may still be connecting to the audio, so we may have to give him a minute or two.
Okay. Well, we're going to get the program started, and when German comes in, then we'll hear from him.
I think he's here now, actually. I think he just
Okay, yes, he just came in.
Good morning.
Yeah, German, good morning. Are you hearing us? Okay, I just heard you, so I would assume that you're hearing us. So, as I said, guys, we're here to discuss the preliminary election observation mission report that was provided by the Organization of American States, OAS, on the St. Kitts Nevis general elections held last Friday. Of course, coming out of that election, the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party, they got a clear mandate with the majority of the seats in the National Assembly, 6 out of the 11 seats in the Assembly, and they have since formed the government. The Prime Minister has been sworn in, the other cabinet members have been sworn in, and they have officially started their work. Portfolios have been assigned, and we are basically back to normal. But as you know, whenever there is an election, we usually have an electoral or election observation mission. They come here to monitor the process by the invitation of the government. And after after the general elections, they provide a number of findings and recommendations on the way forward. It's I would say quite a lengthy report, but it is worth it. A number of recommendations that have been made before and the OAS, they stress that they have made these recommendations before. And so we're hoping that the authorities, the relevant authority, have seen this report and will be working to address some of the findings and recommendations that have been made. We are just joined here by Jihan Williams. Jihan, good morning. I see that you're settling in, so let me give you some time to settle in. But I was saying we have online Kieran Murdoch out of Antigua and Barbuda of Antigua Observer Radio, and Jermaine Abel is also online. So as I indicated in the email earlier, we wanted to begin with the political participation of women. As you guys know, we had 7 women participating in the election this year, the highest in our country's history. The names of the women are the Honorable Marsha Henderson. She's since been sworn in as the Minister of Tourism, Civil Aviation and Urban Development. We have Dr. Janice Daniel Hodge, who's the leader of the Nevis Reformation Party. Akila Byron Nisbet, the deputy leader of the People's Labour Party. We also have from PLP Jacqueline Bryan. We have of the Mall Restoration Movement Patricia Mills Jeffers. We also have Dr. Patricia Bartlett of the NRP. I think that's about it, right? I don't think I missed anyone.
No, I think that's a 7.
That's a 7. Yeah, I didn't miss anyone. That's the 7 women who participated in the race.
No, Shani.
Oh,
Natasha
yes.
Gray.
Natasha Gray Brooks of the People's Action Movement. I apologize. Natasha Gray Brooks of the People's Action Movement. Those are the 7 women who participated in the race. And out of the 7, one of them made it to Parliament and has since been sworn in as a Minister of Government. Jihan, since you are the lone female here on the panel today, can I get your general feedback on how did you feel about 7 women participating in the race for this general elections, and what does that mean for women's participation in politics going forward?
You know, it really was a sight to behold to see seven women running. I believe it could be more. And I hope we get to the point where just because I'm the lone female panelist, I don't have to be the first to talk about women. This should be so mainstream now that anybody can talk about it and have an opinion on it. But I certainly don't mind. I think it is a great indication that women are recognizing their potential and their capabilities in leadership, and not just in what some may call, you know, the soft ministries or the easy constituencies as well. Constituency 1 was Honorable Jeffrey Hanley and 2 women. Akila Byron Nisbet against 2 men, and it was 2, and these are very strong candidates. It's not like you could say, you know, traditionally we always say like number 6 and number 10 are the easy constituencies. So if you put a woman in there, you know, it's just for show if they go up against the incumbents. But these were women who were placed in constituencies where up to, you know, the election day, some people were not even confident in calling the election to any one party. I remember hearing so many concerns that no party could get 6 seats. So at any point in time, we knew that women would be a part of the final government. They did exceptionally well. I think that a lot more could be done to encourage more women even, and younger people even to get involved in politics. And I'm very heartened that the tone of the campaign was it was a bit different. Of course there's a tribalism that's never going to change. But along it, I was heartened by a lot of commendations to women from other parties. I was heartened by people encouraging other people to, vote outside of party lines. Don't feel obligated to stick along with your family traditions and things like that. So there's indications that things are improving in that sense, and I think as we start to change and our paradigms shift, I think more people will actually feel a lot more confident about stepping up to roles of leadership, including young people and more women.
German, your take in terms of the women, the highest number of women participating in our elections for this year, 7 women. What does this mean for women going forward, or their participation in politics?
Hi, good morning. Well, it speaks volumes to the interest being shown by women to participate in this. I can remember for the last 4, 5, 6 years, there have been calls generally, not only in St. Kitts and Nevis, but across the region for more women to participate in politics in general, general politics. And this highlights that the platform, by those women that we would have seen previously in general elections, and those who outside of elections would have been participating, whether not at the parliamentary level or in a ministerial or a PS portfolio, it shows that the foundation that they would have laid has led up to this. And it speaks volumes that, to see a lot of women coming forward and putting forward their shoes in order to lead, because they would have seen that there may have been some issue that they could fill the gap in general. But, as the saying goes, I hope Tian don't, women lead better than men, right? And that speaks volumes and I like it, that women have been showing more interest in politics in general across St. Kitts and Nevis. And this to me is now laying the platform where we might possibly see 11 women putting themselves forward to run in politics in 2027.
Great. Kiran?
Well, I agree with the other two panelists. You're still hearing me quite clearly, I hope, yes?
Yes. It's a bit faded, but I can hear you. Gian, can you hear?
It's very, very soft.
It's I think it's probably it's this headset. I'll hold up the microphone. It's a bit better now, yeah?
It's the same. I haven't heard a difference.
Okay, hold on. So any better now?
A little better.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. All right. I'll just speak up, of course. I would agree with what the other two panelists have had to say. I think it is a important development in the sense that there are many issues which affect women and girls in society that, if we are going to be honest and if we're going to be frank, never get the level of attention they need if the policymakers are only men. That is not to say that men do not have the sensitivity or the common sense or the awareness to be able to legislate with the knowledge that they must accommodate the specific issues and the specific challenges that are faced by women in society. But you will never have those challenges addressed in the same way. So that is one benefit, I think, of having greater female representation in politics. The other benefit, I think, is that it simply broadens the range of views and ideas that you have being brought to the table. Because if, let's say that obviously if you divide the population into roughly halves, if half the population by and large is not participating in terms of leadership roles in politics, well, then there's a whole lot of ideas, there's a whole lot of views, there's a whole lot of opinions, and there's a whole lot of talent that you're simply losing out on simply because of, like I said, that bracket of the population is just not as accustomed to stepping forward to participate in leadership. I know that in the history of Caribbean society and Caribbean politics, it has been a grinding process over time to see a greater inclusion of women in Caribbean leadership and Caribbean politics. I mean, we've always had it, But I think going further and further back, you see the disproportionate nature of it. You know, it's obviously more men to women. I think in Antigua and Barbuda, it was only in 2004 when a Baldwin Spencer administration came into office that the first woman in Antigua and Barbuda was elected to the lower house of Parliament. While the conversation was going on, I just took some notes. I think within the ruling party slate in Antigua and Barbuda right now, because elections here are just around the corner. So you might have me back after the results. After the results come out, you might have me back to talk about it. But there are two out of 17. Out of 17 candidates in the ruling party slate, only two, to my recollection. No, three. Yes, three are women. Three out of 17 in the ruling party. In the opposition, the main opposition party, United Progressive Party, I think the number is 3 again, but that's out of 16, as they don't run a candidate in one of the constituencies, and it's 17 constituencies in total. And then the most recent party, or the new party on the block, the Democratic National Alliance, considered our third party, also has, I think, if I'm not incorrect, 3 out of 16 candidates. They also don't run a candidate in one particular constituency. So 3 out of 16 candidates for them are women. So you still see this disparity. And I think the fact that, in St. Kitts with less constituencies, but a higher number of persons running, I think that is a good indication. But I think surely that we need to see more rapid progress in that regard. I don't know that it's something that we can push, but it would be nice to see it, because we are missing out on the talents of a lot of people who could be serving.
Right. Thank you so much, guys.
I actually think it's something you can push.
Yeah.
To follow on what he was just saying. Mm-hmm. There are, although it doesn't, there are no legal barriers for women to enter politics. Mm-hmm. Nothing says a woman can't. Mm-hmm. However, I think there is a societal and even somewhat on a personal level, a mental block to that, because the journey of women in politics looks very different from the journey of men in politics. So I think that's why we've had a number of initiatives started here in St. Kitts and Nevis and throughout the region, where there's been concerted effort to train women for leadership. I know about the Caribbean Institute for Women in Leadership, and also the Regional Organization for Women in Leadership led by the U.S. Embassy. Mm-hmm. So these sorts of initiatives have arisen because we recognize that women need to be surrounded and women need to be specifically trained, because although, like I said, there's nothing, no barriers stopping women from entering, it still is a very difficult decision for women to make, because they have considerations for children and family and people's personal life gets thrown out into the public in ways that men don't. So it really is one of those things where we can push it, I think. Mm-hmm. So it's a great step where we're seeing more strategic and conscientious effort being placed in training women specifically for leadership, because we have to change the mindset. It's a mindset change.
Do you think it's a case that women are held to a higher standard than men in politics?
Higher standard?
In the sense that they expect more from women if they are to get involved, considering that they give them a hard time when going through the process?
I think sometimes the expectations are lower.
Yeah, exactly.
So you think that, she's going to come in and she's going to cry and she's going to paint everything pink, and she's not going to be able to handle, the other strong men. And so you come in thinking that she's not going to do as well of a job. So then it's changing the mindset. I sat next to a lady in the swearing in ceremony, and I don't know her, but we had good conversation, and she said to me, who you think they're gonna make governor general? And I'm not really sure, but I think we're seeing a lot of changes in society. Maybe they'll consider a woman. She said, "Girl, what? No." We ain't ready for that. We ain't ready for that. I was like, what do you mean we ain't ready for that? How you say we ain't ready for a female governor general? Because people still have that kind of mindset that it has to be a man. It's always been a man. So you think that a woman can't possibly perform at the same level as men simply because you haven't really seen women in that sort of leadership capacity. So this is actually another reason why it's important for more women to get involved in politics, because it shows other women that a man doesn't have to do it. A man doesn't have to be the one to do it. You can actually step up and step forward. So the representation is always good.
I remember having a conversation prior to the election about, the person who I had the conversation with, they do not believe in women participating in politics. They think politics should always be a man thing. And you made the point earlier that some may, if women are to get involved in politics, they may see it as you coming in to cry, can't handle certain situations and all of that. They believe a man is best suited to take on the challenges of any ministry or any country for that matter. And, we had a lengthy conversation, and at the end of the conversation, they were like, yeah, but not right now. So the question is when? When do we start to support and embrace women? And I find that, yes, while we had 7 women participating in the race this year, from some people, my personal experience I saw where they were like, okay, yeah, this is good, but they never really accepted women participating in the politics.
I think like anything else, it will change. Sorry, someone was saying
German?
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to ask if I could add 2 cents.
Oh, sorry, Kieran.
A couple of quick responses. I think it is unfortunate. I think it is unfortunate that we are at this stage. And when I say we, I don't necessarily mean us here on this panel. I mean a Caribbean society, West Indian society, that we are still at this stage, where we still have persons among us who have that sort of very strange traditional, and I call it strange because I find it strange, this very strange traditional and conservative view that politics is a man's game or leadership is a man's game. I mean, that's just not something that I ever understood growing up. I saw women and men in positions of power and leadership. I mean, after a while, when you become conscious, you notice the disproportionate number of men. But it was never an idea in my mind that, leadership, and particularly leadership in governance and politics and administration, is something solely for men. And I think the fact that we do have persons who still tend to think like that, and the fact is we do. I've run into them in Antigua as well. So, it's by no means something that's just in one island. I think the fact that we do still have persons who think like that is rather unfortunate, and it would be it really is necessary that we move so far past that level into the level where we accept that equality, we accept that people are people and there's talent amongst people regardless of whether or not they're men or women, and everyone should have an equal opportunity to participate. 3 points two other points I wanted to make very quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
And it's picking up on something that my colleague said, which was in terms of the nature of politics and how it may affect women differently. One thing that came to mind was the fact that politics is quite nasty. Politics is, unfortunately, and it doesn't have to be, it's something to be improved upon, but politics is something where persons denigrate you, they tear you down, they get into your personal life, they get into your relationships, your family relationships, your down times in life, all the quote-unquote wrong or immoral things you ever did. They talk about your sex life, they talk about your husband, they talk about your wife, they talk about everything. That's the nature of politics. And I've heard it suggested in the past that particularly in a society where women bear the brunt of that sort of attack from men anyway, that in the context of the the politics, which deals with a lot of public shaming and bickering, that is an aspect which may present an even greater challenge to women than men. I've heard that said. The last thing was that politics is also quite nepotistic, in terms of persons who have power appointing their friends to certain positions of power. And what you will find is that if the game is dominated by men, they will tend to appoint their male friends. If it is that, it's mostly a boys' club. If you get what I'm saying. If it is that, let's say, you have a political party, and I think one of the solutions to this is for our political parties to be more democratic in terms of how the candidates are selected, primaries and so on. So let anybody go up and let the voters choose who they want to run for the party, as opposed to, let us say, the party leader and his close circle, who will all tend to be men, looking at another male colleague and, giving him the chosen nod and saying, you run there and you run there and you run there and you run there. Because that has actually happened in Antigua and Barbuda, where you've had women stepping up to the plate to say, let me run in this constituency. But the chosen person who was chosen by a party leader happened to not be another woman. It happened to be a man. And that happens.
I have to agree with you there, Kiran. My perspective of looking at why women are not involved in politics has to do with why are they not getting involved in politics? And I think if we can begin to answer that question, and I know some of what's being said here is actually answering that specific question. But for me, I think firstly, we have to look at the cultural perspective of this question, because if we have a society that's not mature enough to begin to think, and as Devon referenced in a conversation he would have had with a gentleman, a lot of people have not evolved to the point where we actually begin to think about getting more women involved in leadership positions. We still have this culture where people think women should be home. Women should be home dealing with kids, dealing with the house. And society has matured. This is 2022. Why are we still trying to figure out the answer to the question as to why women are not involved in leadership positions? This should be a question as to, do we have too many women in a specific position, right? That's the sort of position that we should go. And I think, for me, if we can begin to answer that specific question and educate society specifically when it comes to this specific topic of women involvement in leadership in general, not only in politics, I think that is where we will actually begin to, unravel the mysteries behind this. And even though society is slowly transitioning to the point where we're beginning to address the issue, it's not moving fast enough in the 21st century. In 2022, why are we still thinking of, like, for example, I read 2 reports recently, Serena spoke as to why she's actually retiring from the sport of tennis, because she wants to start a family and all of this, and the issues that come with that. And then we had just yesterday, one of the British athletes, she pulled up with cramps, and then she began to explain, it's her issues pertaining to female. That's why, she had the cramps, and she's pushing for more resources and more doctors and scientists to begin to do the research behind that and connect it with athletics. But the point is, if it's a man's world, a lot of these issues would have been addressed specifically earlier. And going back to the topic of women, in politics, I think at this point in time, we have to begin to lay the foundation, start from the school level to educate society about certain issues and important topics that are being neglected. We should not be hearing people asking why, what's an issue with having a female governor general? We should not. I don't think that, Lord Nevis, for example, they're the deputy governor on that island specifically is a female. So I don't see any problem with that specifically. And I think we really need to begin to change the mindset of the public. And I just want to go back to one other thing, Devon. I think
sure.
One of the issues that I found is the reason why people don't like women involved in politics, and it's a quote unquote boys club, as Kieran would have, alluded to, is the fact that we don't see women in leadership positions that they can actually negotiate. There's a running joke that says it's who wear the tighter pants in the club gets the decisions done, right? And the point is, would a woman be able to negotiate like a meal? For example, if you're going overseas to an engagement or you're going to negotiate, let's say the Minister of Foreign Affairs, would she be able to get that perspective for St. Kitts and Nevis, for example? And I think we really need to begin to change that mindset in general when it comes to this topic and women in leadership positions.
Guys, it's 11:38. We have to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue the conversation. Let's hit this break, and we'll be right back.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is WINN FM.
People make the world go
If you need protection, you need one who you can trust. To secure your investment, you need one who'll do you just. TDC Insurance, you're the one that you can trust. TDC Insurance, you're always safe with us. TDC Insurance is your go-to insurance company for all your insurance needs. We take pride in offering you the best solutions and ensuring our customers are fully satisfied. TDC Insurance, we take good care of you, guaranteeing you peace of mind. You're always safe with us.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
All right, welcome back to Inside the News here on WINN FM 98.9. It's 11:40. We have here on the panel with us today Jihan Williams, Kieran Murdoch out of Antigua, and German Awil right here, St. Kitts and Nevis. We are on the preliminary election observation mission report prepared by the OAS on the recently concluded St. Kitts and Nevis general elections. And we began with the political participation of women. Now, I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to read the report, but here the OAS recommended the following. It says to support the efforts of St. Kitts and Nevis to promote equal representation of women in decision-making positions, the OAS mission recommends, as advised by the OAS mission in 2015, that political parties make greater efforts to actively recruit and nominate women as candidates and to establish codes of conduct within their organizations that prevent and penalize any type of restriction or intimidation towards women. Considering the implementation of an effective gender quota in order to encourage gender parity and increase the number of women candidates across all parties. Collecting and publishing sex disaggregated data that would facilitate a deeper analysis of women's participation in political life, including statistical data on candidates, poll workers, persons who register, and voters. It says developing training opportunities, mentorship programs, and other initiatives to promote women's participation and leadership in politics, and providing targeted financial support to promote the political participation of women. Now, with developing training opportunities, mentorship programs, and other initiatives, I think we have done this, or we are doing this.
Yes.
We are doing this. In terms of, it says, the first one, establishing codes of conduct within organizations. I'm not sure if this is a thing. I would hope so. Kiran, your take?
Well, I thought it very interesting that the OAS made that recommendation specifically towards establishing codes of conduct within your organizations, because I think that it sort of goes back to what I had mentioned before and what some of the panelists were also speaking of when we reference the issue of, at least when I reference the issue of nepotism. A lot of people may not like that I use that word, but if you think about who ends up being elected to parliament, that person has to be accepted by a political organization. So you then have to take the lens away from the parliament itself to say, okay, well, who is in parliament? Or away from the election and look at the political organization and say, what is the culture within this political organization, this political party? Who holds power in this political party? And are they inclined to establish democratic procedures within such a political organization so that it is an equal playing field? Not only is there an equal playing field, but the sort of nasty politics that discourages both men and women from participating is not tolerated. That's something that political parties just absolutely don't do. Well, let me not speak for St. Kitts and Nevis. Let me speak for Antigua and Barbuda. I can say from Antigua and Barbuda's perspective that political parties do not do enough to enforce rules which demand that their members conduct themselves in such a manner publicly and in dealing with each other and in primaries and while competing and while contesting for nominations in a manner that is wholesome, in a manner that is respectful of each other. And so I think that the OAS, having put this recommendation in this report, clearly indicates that they too recognize that you need to have within our political organizations, our political parties, that recognition that we must equal the playing field. We must recognize the sort of nepotism that occurs, which is that those who have power in a political party, those who have the power to appoint their friends, their colleagues, persons that they know to other positions, will do so. That's the nature of politics, and it's something that we have to combat. But yeah, that's my take on it.
Yeah, Jihan?
Yes, I'm shaking my head as he's speaking because I think that really is the key to all of this.
Yes.
It depends on the leadership of the political parties because they ultimately have the say in who is selected, or if the parties don't have that sort of democratic process to go through primaries and runoffs and all these different things to select their candidates. But it has to be a concerted effort. And I think that really is key. What struck me most about this recommendation was the recommendation about collecting sex disaggregated data that would facilitate a deeper analysis of women's participation in political life. I think back to nomination day, and I saw at least 95% women in the videos behind the candidates and going behind them, rallying behind them. You look at the political meetings, mostly women to front of the stage and, doing the work in the background. I think I really agree with this recommendation, because what it says to me is that if women are doing so much work to sustain politics and the political forums and structures, and yet we still have laws and regulations that don't speak to the female experience, it says that we're being ignored. We are working and we're being ignored. And I think that this sort of data would actually help advocacy groups and persons who lobby on behalf of women to have a much stronger footing to say, we need to make it on the legislative agenda. We need to make it on the ballots for when you're picking candidates, because we are the ones doing the work.
You know, Jihan, that's the point that I made. One of the points that I made when I was talking to the individual, that the political parties, they are driven by women. From planning a breakfast right up to planning the party's convention, women. They are the ones who take up the post of treasurer, secretary, in some instances, maybe chairperson. They form part of the different constituency groups. They are the backbone. They are the ones who keep these organizations running, going on and on and on. They are the ones who make sure that these things happen. So why is it that when there is time for leadership, women are not considered, or women are classified as not good enough to be a part of that? Jermaine, you wanted to make a point?
Yes. I just to address what you said, I'm not so sure, and we totally have not done studies or anything of the nature to determine whether or not women are not considered. For me, it's whether or not women are confident enough to want to come into politics.
To step
I'm
forward.
not saying that a lot of women are not alienated, right? But for me, because what I'm gathering is a lot of women may be scared to join, and it goes back to the point I think both Jihan and Kiran said, that women in general are concerned about the electoral process and the campaigning process, and you're going to be bashed for whatever reason it is. So, but just moving on to a couple of points. One, my biggest issue, and I support the recommendations that were put forward by the OAS, but one of the things that Mr. Golding said, former Prime Minister Golding said, when we interviewed him on elections day, is whether or not the recommendations put forward will actually be implemented. And that has been a concern throughout, not only in St. Kitts and across the region. He himself said to us when I asked him the question, whether or not, why are we still seeing certain issues year after year, elections after elections? And he said, when they put forward these recommendations from the Pacific nations right down to the Caribbean, they don't implement those recommendations that they put forward. They will only look at them when it comes to the election cycle again. Right. But one thing I must note, though, is I must give commendations to the Prime Minister, Dr. Terence True, because when he spoke to the police, he picked up that women were not in leadership positions within the police force, especially within the hierarchy of the police force at the moment. Right. So it's something that is ever present in society, and it's something that has to be addressed. And the recommendations put forward by the OAS is critical in terms of bridging the gap in society and bringing St. Kitts and Nevis together. Because let's say, for example, Nevis's local elections, which are imminent, 4 women will be campaigning for leadership positions. They would then have to integrate themselves and have discussions with the federal government on St. Kitts. And to have women in such leadership positions would be good. I'm not campaigning for any party, right? I just want the public to understand that. But it just highlights that, women and their policies would be critical in terms of shaping and ensuring that, both sides of the spectrum are actually having a voice. I mean, yes, it was nice for us to have 7 women running, but in some of the constituencies, realistically, only one person or one woman would have been able to become elected. It would be nice to see 11 women in parliament, 11 women representing the 11 constituencies in St. Kitts and Nevis. But that's not possible. But at the same time, it's critical issues, and these recommendations highlight those issues.
Guys, it's 11:52. I wanted us to, I don't think we would be able to cover the entire report, but there is something else that I wanted us to get to here in the report on the electoral organization, where it speaks to the counting of ballots and transmission of results.
Oh boy.
In our elections here, this continues to be a major talking point. It continues to be an issue, I would say, where it appears as if no progress is being made towards updating this process. Whenever we are planning to cover elections in terms of the election watch night, we always have to take into consideration that it's going to be a long night. And so we anticipate to be here between 7 and 10 hours, because we know they're going to take forever. They have to transport all of the ballot boxes from the different polling stations to one counting center. And of course, as you know, that process, that delays the entire process. The report says, okay, I just lost it. Okay, I have it. It says here that the process of determining the results of elections in St. Kitts and Nevis can be a protracted one. Upon the close of polls, ballot boxes are sealed and transported to a central counting center in each constituency, where they are opened and the ballots counted directly by the returning officer. As the counting process does not begin until all ballot boxes have been received at the counting center, a delay in closing the polls at any single polling station delays the overall counting or tabulation process for the entire constituency. Even where all polling stations close promptly, the requirement that all ballots cast in a constituency be reviewed by a single person, the returning officer, after more than 12 exhausting hours of managing an electoral process is impractical and inefficient. As noted earlier, citizens have a right to receive information on the results of an election in a timely and effective manner. The mission therefore recommends, in keeping with the advice of the OAS missions in 2010, 2011, and 2015.
My God.
So they have been they have been talking about this for quite some time. And it appears as if nothing is being done to address this issue. The recommendations are amending the Elections Act to allow a preliminary count of ballots to be made by the presiding officer at each polling station in the presence of party agents immediately following the close of polls, both to expedite the count and to enhance confidence and security. This will facilitate a more timely issuance of preliminary results to citizens, and a second and final count of the ballots can thereafter be undertaken by the returning officer to verify the results before they are certified. Just 5 minutes before 12, we'll see how much we can get in, and when we come back after the news, we will continue. I was on the ground throughout the elections, and of course here for the night for the election watch, and I think the first result came in after 12.
Yes, the report said that too.
Yeah.
12:45.
12:45. We were sitting here waiting. It felt like we were waiting forever for the first count to come in. And the first count was from constituency number 10 in Nevis, which is the smallest constituency.
Yeah.
And only a little bit over 800 people voted in that constituency. I think that's what the report said, a little bit over 800. So you realize that it's an exhausting process. And considering that the OAS, they have been talking about this since 2010. This is 2022.
Yes, I felt it's embarrassing.
It
I
is.
think it's very embarrassing that so many things you read throughout the report says, as mentioned in 2010, mentioned in, and constantly showing you that we keep highlighting what the problems are, but we're not making the necessary steps to fix them. And I think to some extent, I can understand why that is the case, because, things have to be prioritized. And in 2020, I don't think any of us really thought that we'd be back here in 2022.
Yeah.
Especially after dealing with the pandemic. And of course, that would have taken our resources and our attention in 2020, coming up to 2020 and a little after 2020. So if you think about it, having to deal with the pandemic and all of the things that were happening with the vaccine and people jobs and all sorts of, issues, relevant issues, where would we have found the time to do this unless it was actually prioritized? So our Prime Minister, I think, has to say, we are not going into another elections on these boundaries. We are not going into another elections with these processes. It has to change, and I am going to institute whatever task force or committee or whatever is necessary to get the actual work done by, let's say, 2024, so that we have enough space and time for a 2025 elections. If nothing else happens, but I'm just saying, we need to. This has to be a priority. It has to be a priority, because if we're waiting for the right time or space in our legislative agenda or whatever, it will not just magically appear. It has to become a priority.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. I agree with you, Jihan, in the sense that we picked up the same thing when we read the report. The OAS kept saying, well, we said this already.
Just copy and paste their old reports.
But it's
here we are again.
It's really, really sad for me, because, it's like they've been talking about this for some time, and I guess it's a matter of priority. I hope that it will be on the list of priorities for this new administration, something that they will take very, very seriously.
I hope so too.
Because we can't keep coming back here to talk about this, and nothing is happening, nothing is changing. It's really exhausting.
Boundaries unchanged since 1983, when I was born. It's crazy.
Guys, we are out of time. I assume Jermaine and Kieran, they wanted to add their 2 cents, but we have to break for the news now. And I hope you guys were taking notes. When we come back,
for like $5 there.
Let me ask, how long is the newscast? 15, half an hour? How long is it?
About 20 minutes. Just about 20 minutes. So when we come back, we'll continue where we left off from. This is Inside the News right here on WINN FM 98.9. We'll take this break, and we'll be right back.
You found the sound. 98.9. WINN FM.
We now bring you the headline news. The headline news is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and the ICDF Taiwan Technical Mission.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Till you walk with a low
or 469-5303. Delia Walwyn, people you can trust.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
With over a century of perfection behind the Mackeson name, a smooth blend with perfect balance and richness, it's no wonder Mackeson Triple Stout has a legacy of perfection. Enjoyed the world over. Introducing our new look with the same great taste. Mackeson. All hail the king.
Please drink responsibly.
Think before you bin it. There can be some use in it. The Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority, in collaboration with Taiwan ICDF Technical Mission and the Department of Environment, presents Let's Recycle. We're encouraging all residential homes, commercial businesses, and schools to bring along your plastic bottles, metal cans, and aluminum cans ready for an opportunity to win big. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the following locations. In Nevis, every second and fourth Friday of each month at Delta Petroleum, ex-Petrol in Camps, Big Six in Gingerland, and the Old Artisan Village in Charlestown. In St. Kitts, every second and fourth Tuesday at the Connery Roundabout, every first and third Tuesday at Buckley's parking lot in front of Best Buy, and the last Saturday of each month in Deep Bay. But wait, that's not all. 1 pound equals 1 point. So bring your recyclables and build up your points for a chance to win stainless steel thermal bottles, flatware, and much more. To learn more about the recycling project, do visit our Facebook page at Let's Recycle in St. Kitts and Nevis, or contact us at 465-2372. The choice is yours. Save it or waste it. You are the difference. So think smart. Take PAT, reduce, reuse, recycle. That was the WINN FM Headline News. The Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and the ICDF Taiwan Technical Mission.
Think before you bin it. There can be some use in it. The St. Kitts and Nevis Solid Waste Management, in collaboration with Taiwan ICDF Technical Mission and the Department of Environment, presents Let's Recycle. We are encouraging all residential homes, commercial businesses, and schools to bring along your plastic bottles, metal cans, and aluminum cans ready for an opportunity to win big. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every second and fourth Tuesday each month at the following locations in St. Kitts: the Connery Roundabout, every first and third Tuesday at Buckley's parking lot in front of Best Buy. With the WINN Headline News, I am Kevon Brown. Making the headlines, new Foreign Affairs Minister emphasizes need for St. Kitts and Nevis to be a global decision maker. At the pre-COP27 Caribbean Heads of Government Conference that ended on August 17th, several regional heads of government reflected on what they think needs to happen in the fight against the effects of climate change. Internationally, a year since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, many women are still banned from working or getting an education. Now, the details. Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, in his first meeting with the staff of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, emphasized that the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis must not be passive in its interaction with the rest of the world and the decisions made at the global level.
We intend not to sit by and just allow the world to make decisions for us. We want to be part of those decisions, and we want to make decisions that the rest of the world will understand and appreciate what we are doing.
St. Kitts and Nevis has no natural resources to export like Trinidad and Tobago with asphalt, oil, and natural gas. In Guyana, the discoveries of oil wells recently made, and bauxite in Jamaica and Guyana. The Foreign Affairs Minister highlighted that we have one crucial resource that we should not neglect.
We are a small nation. The only resource that we really have is our people. Some people may say passports, but it's the people that we really have as a resource at this particular time. And so it is important for our people to be properly trained. Training is critically important. It is important that our people understand what is happening in the rest of the world.
Dr. Douglas said he was humbled to serve in his new capacity and expressed gratitude to the former Minister Premier of Nevis, the Honorable Mark Brantley, for the work he and the ministry did in the previous 7 years.
I want to thank the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, that is Premier Mark Brantley, for serving in this capacity and serving the interest of the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the government of St. Kitts and Nevis in this particular capacity for the last, I think, near 7 years. Of course, a lot has been achieved. What we would want to do now is to build on that which has been achieved from the standpoint of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
On August 19th, Prime Minister the Honorable Dr. Terence Drew and Premier Brantley met for the first time since Drew assumed office to discuss the relationship between both administrations, after pledging to be an inclusive Prime Minister, especially for the citizens and residents on the sister island of Nevis, at the swearing-in ceremony of the Cabinet on August 13th. Dr. Douglas thanked the staff for their service and asked for their continued support in building the image and resources of St. Kitts and Nevis.
I want to not only thank the Minister, but you, the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, especially led by the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Bass, and the senior persons, and the others, I would say, who would have provided support in this ministry for whatever successes it would have achieved. So you are part of not only the building of the image of this country, but also, to a large extent, you must be contributed towards the further development of the people, the human resource of this country, and at the same time using our resources to ensure that we can establish ourselves as an independent country around the world.
In regional news, at the pre-COP27 Caribbean Heads of Government Conference that ended on August 17th, several regional heads of government reflected on what they think needs to happen in the fight against the effects of climate change. The Virgin Islands Consortium has more.
After 2 intense days of meetings, the pre-COP27 Caribbean Heads of Government Conference came to an end on Wednesday. The 4 prime ministers who spoke at the event's closing press conference, Philip Davis from host country the Bahamas, Dickon Mitchell of Grenada, Roosevelt Skerritt of Dominica, and Mia Motley from Barbados, shared reflections on the activity and their thoughts on what would happen moving forward. Davis, in his remarks, said he was cautiously optimistic about what lay ahead in the run-up to the 27th United Nations Climate Change Conference of Parties.
Our voices will be loud, our voices will be heard, and I'm certain that we'll come up with a consensus position as to what we would like to do. My caution is just how the wealthier countries, who are the culprits, if I could call them that, for where we are today, are prepared to to acknowledge their sins, repent, and do what is right in all the circumstances.
I think the importance of having such a meeting is well recognized, and I think it's something that we need to do, cop or no cop, because clearly we are at the front lines of the existential issue that climate change presents for us on a daily basis, and at certain times of the year, particularly in the case of Grenada and many of the islands during the hurricane season. For 6 months of the year, you live with that reality. So I'm heartened by the fact that we've had this conference. A lot of technical detail is presented. That means we obviously need to go back and do some additional homework. But I think there are a couple of things that are quite clear coming out of this conference. I think we are resolute in our collective desire to advocate for ensuring that justice is done. I think the issue of climate change has gone beyond that of a moral issue, but it's a justiciable issue. And I think as islands that have borne the brunt of the proven loss and damage arising from the greenhouse gases, that we are entitled to compensation. I certainly want to assure citizens of the Caribbean that we intend to fight. We intend to advocate, and we intend to do everything in our collective and individual power to ensure that our rights and our right to live a quality of life that is deserving is maintained and promoted.
The Grenadian Prime Minister announced that the country's former Minister for Climate Resilience and the Environment, Simon Steele, had on Monday been appointed as head of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. He noted that the region would certainly be calling upon Steele for quality representation. Dominica's Prime Minister reiterated the message from regional leadership that has been promulgated over the last few years that the greatest threat the Caribbean was currently exposed to was that of climate change.
We met in 1997 and created the Kyoto Protocol. And then we have COP, this is the Conference of the Parties, and we've had 27, we'll be having 27 this year of those. In normal life, these matters should have gone to court. But we decided to go to mediation. And the developed world accepted that they're the ones who are causing the warming of the environment through the carbon emissions. And they also recognize that we in the developing world, and we're speaking of the Caribbean in particular, are the major victims of the actions. And therefore, we are entitled to compensation. They agreed that they would provide us with $100 billion a year, and that is 14 years ago in Copenhagen. They promised to make $100 billion available to us so that we can put systems in place to mitigate against the impact of climate change. This was supposed to have been materialized in 2020. We recognize, okay, we're in COVID, and everybody's been affected, and they said, okay, well, we'll put it to 2023. I have had the fortune of attending several of these conferences, and at no time I ever heard anybody speaking about providing us with loans. And now we're hearing them talking about loans. And then they are bringing up conditionalities as if we're in a structural adjustment program with the IMF and talking about debt to GDP ratio. The reality is we have to get the developed world to live up to the expectations.
And the arrogance of the developed world in believing that there will not be failed societies or extinct species is what literally galls us. Because we know in this region that Montserrat has now a fraction of the population that it had prior to the eruption of the volcano. And therefore we know that natural disasters can lead to climate migration. And regrettably, there has been too little attention paid to planet, to people, and to poverty by those countries who have been motivated by profit. It is time for the world to stand up and say enough is enough.
COP27 will be held from the 6th to the 18th of November 2022 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt.
We now bring you these international reports.
Frishta's business has nearly come to a halt. Earning a living from making traditional clothes and handicrafts is no longer an option, since many small businesses have gone bankrupt. In addition to sanctions and frozen assets, the Taliban's reversal of women's participation in society has further hindered the flow of aid to Afghanistan. Frishta is struggling to keep up morale for her 7 children, whose education has suffered for years, first because of the pandemic and then the Taliban takeover.
It's been 1 year that they have been promising and haven't done anything. We haven't seen any results. Girls can't go to schools and women can't go to their jobs.
Women in cities complain of harsh restrictions, from face veils to women's attire and suspension of many public jobs. The Taliban government says it is implementing Islamic law.
The Ministry of Vice and Virtue has replaced the Ministry of Women's Affairs. There are some women who've been appointed by the Taliban who don't think it's just tokenism.
Saying that women can't go around the city or do their jobs freely isn't accurate. I still have female staff working at this hospital. Female doctors are doing their jobs as in the previous government. Besides doctors, other female personnel are also working in some government departments.
3/4 of Afghans live outside the cities, and most of rural Afghanistan is traditionally conservative. That's where the Taliban's biggest support base comes from. Nilofer is a teacher, and despite her brothers being unemployed in this government, she supports the Taliban. She says a majority of women in Afghanistan wear what she calls the hijab in their own way. And that's an Afghan tradition, not a Taliban rule.
Wouldn't most women from Afghanistan look at you and hear you and think that you've been brainwashed and this is not what most women of Afghanistan want?
We aren't brainwashed. I teach the Quran. Islam has given rights to women like inheritance, education, to become a professor and anything they want to be. If we go without the hijab, it's against the Quran. And if we are Muslims, we should follow the Quran.
Taliban officials have been accused of using excessive force when women protest. They in turn want women to organize protests after seeking permission, and they also cite safety and security as concerns. But to achieve that, most women of Afghanistan will have to trust the Taliban, and that's unlikely while most schools for teenage girls remain closed and promises to uphold women's rights are not put into action. Sama bin Javed, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
As residents continue to flee the Donetsk region of Ukraine, explosions erupted overnight near military bases deep in Russian-held areas, and Russia itself, an apparent display of Kyiv's growing might far from front lines. Inside Russia, 2 villages were evacuated after explosions at an ammunition dump. But Kyiv has been coy, remarking on the blasts without claiming direct responsibility. More directly, the Ukrainian government is raising alarms about a nuclear power station it says Russian occupation forces are using as a staging ground for military strikes. On Friday, Kyiv said it suspected Moscow is planning a large-scale provocation at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant as justification to disconnect it from the Ukrainian power grid and connect it to Russia's. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, visiting the Ukrainian port of Odessa on Friday, said the nuclear site belonged to Ukraine and said all military forces should be withdrawn.
If we demilitarize, as we propose, the plant, the problem will be solved. And obviously, the electricity from Zaporizhzhia is Ukrainian electricity, and it's necessary, especially during the winter, for the Ukrainian people, and this principle must be fully respected.
Russian President Vladimir Putin blamed Kyiv for shelling the nuclear complex and said there is risk of a nuclear catastrophe. The Kremlin said that during a call between Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron, Putin confirmed Russia's readiness for a mission by the International Atomic Energy Agency to Zaporizhia, and that Putin would provide inspectors with the necessary assistance.
Extreme drought conditions persist in northern Mexico. The city of Monterrey, home to some 5 million people, has been particularly hard hit.
People are fighting over the water. The trucks arrive and people don't respect the line. It's chaos in our neighborhood. It's sad, but what can we do? We need a miracle.
These are the driest conditions the region has seen in 30 years, with recorded rainfall levels far below average. During a recent visit to Monterrey, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador promised to continue to provide emergency government assistance.
I believe this situation will help lead everyone towards participating in the conservation of water so that we will be more conscious about the importance of this vital resource.
Experts say as much as 65% of Mexico's territory is currently experiencing moderate to severe drought conditions. They attribute it in part to this year's unseasonable La Niña weather pattern, which has pushed rain and cooler temperatures further north. Extreme heat and a lack of rain are also wreaking havoc across the border in the United States, prompting action from officials there.
The growing drought crisis is fueled by the impacts of climate change, including extreme heat, low precipitation, in turn severe drought conditions that perpetuate the climate crisis by increasing wildfire risk, affecting crop yields, and ultimately disrupting our ecosystems and the climate as a whole.
U.S. states like Arizona and Nevada have already been asked to cut back what they take from the drought-stricken Colorado River, which supplies water to some 40 million people across 7 U.S. states, and to communities in northwestern Mexico. Less water from the Colorado River is also raising longer-term concerns in both the U.S. and Mexico over potential food shortages if action is not taken to address the crisis. Manuel Rapalo, Al Jazeera, Mexico City.
This crisis has lasted weeks and it's not over yet. The worst monsoon rains in 30 years, inundating vast areas of land and hitting Pakistan's poorest province, Balochistan, the hardest. Hundreds of schools and thousands of homes have been destroyed here. Across Pakistan, hundreds of people have died and hundreds of thousands have been displaced, struggling to reach some kind of safety, to find some kind of shelter.
Floods have taken everything from us. We were only able to save our kids and few livestock. We are in dire need of help as early as possible.
We lost everything in the floods and left empty-handed. We don't have food, shelter, or even clean drinking water. Many of us are suffering from diarrhea and other gastro diseases, while the government is not doing anything for us.
Criticism of the government extends beyond the immediate response and back through previous governments. Plans to update infrastructure and resilience repeatedly not implemented, leaving people exposed to monsoon flooding every year. This year's enormous rainfalls particularly devastating. Pakistan's Prime Minister has repeatedly visited hard-hit areas this flooding season, insisting his administration is doing all it can.
The 30-year record for monsoon rains has been broken this year. It's a few hundred times more than normal in Balochistan. That's brought miseries to people's lives, but both federal and provincial governments are committed to helping these poor people to their utmost.
Pakistan has been ranked the 8th most exposed country in the world to the risks of climate change, a bleak window on the future for the newly grieving and displaced, contemplating how and where to rebuild their lives. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera.
You were listening to the WINN FM headline news on 98.9. Our top stories were: new Foreign Affairs Minister emphasizes need for St. Kitts and Nevis to be a global decision maker. At the pre-COP27 Caribbean Heads of Government Conference that ended on August 17th, several regional heads of government reflected on what they think needs to happen in the fight against the effects of climate change. Internationally, a year since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, many women are still banned from working or getting an education. Thank you for listening. With the WINN Headline News, I am Kevon Brown. Making the headlines, new Foreign Affairs Minister emphasizes need for St. Kitts and Nevis to be a global decision maker. At the pre-COP27 Caribbean Heads of Government Conference that ended on August 17th, several regional heads of government reflected on what they think needs to happen in the fight against the effects of climate change. Internationally, a year since the Taliban seized control of Afghanistan, many women are still banned from working or getting an education. Now, the details. Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, in his first meeting with the staff of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, emphasized that the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis must not be passive in its interaction with the rest of the world and the decisions made at the global level.
We intend not to sit by and just allow the world to make decisions for us. We want to be part of those decisions, and we want to make decisions that the rest of the world will understand and appreciate what we are doing.
St. Kitts and Nevis has no natural resources to export like Trinidad and Tobago with asphalt, oil, and natural gas. In Guyana, the discoveries of oil wells recently made, and bauxite in Jamaica and Guyana. The foreign
That was the WINN FM Headline News. The Headline News is brought to you by Caribbean Alliance, The Grange, KDP Enterprises, Carib Brewery, and the ICDF Taiwan Technical Mission. Think before you bin it. There can be some use in it. The Nevis Solid Waste Management Authority, in collaboration with Taiwan ICDF Technical Mission and the Department of Environment, presents Let's Recycle. We're encouraging all residential homes, commercial businesses, and schools to bring along your plastic bottles, metal cans, and aluminum cans, ready for an opportunity to win big. From 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the following locations: in Nevis, every second and fourth Friday of each month at Delta Petroleum, ex-Petrol in Camps, Big Six in Gingerland, and the Old Artisan Village in Charlestown. In St. Kitts, every second and fourth Tuesday at the Connery Roundabout, every first and third Tuesday at Buckley's parking lot in front of Best Buy, and the last Saturday of each month in Dieppe Bay. But wait, that's not all. 1 pound equals 1 point. So bring your recyclables and build up your points for a chance to win stainless steel thermal bottles, flatware, and much more. To learn more about the recycling project, do visit our Facebook page at Let's Recycle in St. Kitts and Nevis, or contact us at 465-2372. The choice is yours. Save it or waste it. You are the difference. So think smart. Take PAT, reduce, reuse, recycle.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Did you know that the Grange Healthcare Facility is the first purpose-built, non-governmental healthcare organization on St. Kitts? It's situated at Otley's, 7 miles east of Basseterre in beautifully landscaped surroundings. The Grange has a team of highly trained professionals and provides care that's rated as being comparable with UK and North American standards. The Grange offers varied accommodations to suit your individual needs, and our all-inclusive packages make the cost of care per hour the most competitive on the island. Services include convalescent care for all ages, daycare facilities for older adults, rehabilitation services services, and training and continuing education for healthcare providers. For more information, call 466-5525 or 465-8020. Fax 466-8221 or email thegrangehealth@gmail.com or visit our website at www.grangehealthcarefacility.com.
Protect your lifestyle with Caribbean Alliance Insurance. Dealing well with a low reputation and service for second to none. Securing you is our mission. People that you can trust, your business, property, we got you covered. Motor or personal, whatever it is, we got you covered. 130 years in this business, we've got you covered. For all your insurance needs, visit or call us at 465-2631 or 469-5303. Dealio Walwyn, people you can trust.
Shipping your cargo shouldn't be a hassle. It can be as easy as a single call to Amerijet International, your worldwide cargo transportation solution. We provide all the services you need to ship your goods anywhere in the world, whether your shipment is fresh, frozen, large or small, alive or hazardous. You can count on Amerijet to deliver it safe and sound. Amerijet International, by land, sea or air, we get it there. For more information, visit us online at www.amerijet.com or call us at KDP Enterprises at 466-9595.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. WINN FM.
People make the world go
Good afternoon, and welcome back to Inside the News here on WINN FM 98.9. It's Saturday, August 20th, 2022. It's 12:35 here in the studios of WINN FM, and we are going to continue where we left off from. We were on the topic of the counting of ballots and the transmission of results. Kieran and Jermaine, they did not get the opportunity to add their contribution as we had to go for the break. So Kieran, we're going to continue where we left off from and get your take on, as someone from the outside looking in, our general elections here. Is it any different to how it is done in Antigua in terms of the counting and the transmission of results there?
I don't think so. I think it's pretty similar. I could be wrong because I'm not an expert necessarily on what the rules and the regulations were, but I do remember in 2018 reporting for the Observer during the general election in Antigua, and we tended to have the same sort of a process where everything has to stop before the counting starts, and so you end up beginning the counting quite late in the evening. I remember, and just to add a bit of an anecdote in addition to your description of the exhaustion of election coverage, I had my first taste of that in 2018 when we obviously the coverage would have started way early in the morning. Everybody was on shift. We went way down until the night. Then the next day came. It's early in the morning. Results are coming in. We're reporting in the results from all the constituencies. The commentators are back at the station on radio. And then I had to attend the victory rally after the ruling party would have been re-elected. This is like 3 o'clock in the morning now. I've been going since 6 a.m. the day before. And so I had to leave the victory rally, go back to Observer, write the front page story, with, all the different pictures and whatever for the victory rally, because I was reporting from the PM's constituency. And they didn't. My supervisor at the time did me the disservice, unfortunately, of not actually telling me that I was intended to write the front page story. So I got a call while I was at this victory rally at like 3:00 in the morning, saying, "Hey, aren't you going to get back to write the story?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Anyway. So I get back there, I do that, and by like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, I then realize that I'm supposed to produce the morning news for that day. And I just, at some point, I just collapsed. But anyway, that anecdote aside, it is a similar process. I do recall that you had the polling stations, you had persons coming to vote, and it was only after everything was closed, 6 o'clock passed, all the people in the line finished, and everything wrapped up, that you then sealed things, moved them away, and you brought them to a place where they were counted, and the person doing the counting was the returning officer, I believe. Well, yes, it was the returning officer. And it is a process that takes quite a bit of time, and it can be improved upon with these recommendations that are put here. One thing I would say about the recommendations broadly, and to the fact, as was said by the other panelists, by Gian as well, of the non-implementation, I think that's a problem that we face throughout the region. I think that it's not just an OAS issue in terms of what the OAS recommends when they send an election or they do an election report. It really has to do with the attention that we pay as a nation and the sort of value and credibility we place on any sort of external advice. I sometimes find that we have a way of treating external advice with some level of contempt. Who are they to tell us how to run our affairs? Regardless of who they is, regardless if it is CARICOM, OECS, our brothers and neighbors, regardless of whether it is the UN. I mean, the amount of recommendations we get from all sorts of international organizations: deal with your prison, deal with gender-based violence, do this to combat this, do this to combat corruption, do this to reform your electoral process, do this for your infrastructure, do this for your tendering process. I mean, the myriad of UN organizations, World Trade groups and institutions, human rights organizations, and groups like the OAS, the myriad of reports and recommendations that are actually quite valuable that they bring out in reference to our various small island states that say, you ought to pick up on these things. Many times we just leave them in a stack to collect dust. In fact, sometimes we actually make the report writing for these guys really easy, because what they do, they go back to the old report, they copy it, they paste it onto the new document, and they write a line that says, these were the recommendations that we gave you 5 years ago. You haven't implemented them. This is what we recommend. Print.
German?
No, he's correct. I sure we can just tell them, hey, don't write a recommendation. We'll pull the one out from the file that we have somewhere back at the back of the cabinet that you sent to us. Save the paper, save the earth. Right. But I just want to touch quickly on one thing Kieran said. Yes, we have an implementation deficit or syndrome. That's it's a Caribbean-wide thing. But for me, the issue that we have, again, it goes back to the root of the culture. We don't have a full trust in some of these international organizations, and I could reference maybe the Human Rights Council, for example. I think this was 2015, 2014, 2015, 2016, somewhere around there. They had recommended that the region, including St. Kitts and Nevis, withdraw the death penalty issue. As part of that recommendation, these international agencies would be providing funding to assist with the various overcrowding of prisons as a result of repealing that specific law. Many Caribbean countries have, we've not really pushed the death penalty, but a lot of our prisons, including in St. Kitts and Nevis, has been overcrowded. But the broader context is, what sort of support have these countries been able to receive since that recommendation has been put out and full implementation of or carrying out the death penalty has ceased? So that aside, that's me ranting on that topic. But when we look at the recommendations put forward, Devon, it's difficult for us to wholeheartedly just make changes. for these. And I know just recently Mark Brantley at a press conference when I asked him about electoral reform and constitutional reform, he said the first thing that we need to do, yes, he's conscious that it's something that's needed, and the People's Action Movement and the Concerned Citizens Movement also was campaigning on something like that. Right, they both acknowledged that it was needed. The issue, though, was educating the public on a lot of these recommendations that were put forward. For example, the boundaries, we know that has to change. Regardless of what happens, it has to change. But in order for us, and Jihan could, speak to some of it, that it's not something that wholeheartedly can just change without changing the Constitution. And that's another legal issue that you have to come to the public with and begin with education. So as much as we talk about a lot of these changes, we have to start with the root, which is the public in general, and begin to educate them. Because I think one of the other recommendations that the Premier did talk about, I think we have to go to a referendum for one aspect of it. And if we don't get the buy-in from the public, then we will have the same issue again in 2027, again in 2028. But to the broad issue of the counting of ballots and the time in which the results are announced, from my experience, count the ballots at the polling station, put the results, a copy of it at the end of the day on that specific polling area. So if Mr. Abel wants to now come to make a calculation to say, he's covering it, he can say, Devon, we can now call constituency 8 for X person because we went to all of these polling stations and we've calculated the tally based on what we've seen, and then a decision can be made rather than having one central location, because it's time consuming and it then opens up for criticism. And that's what's been happening for the last umpteen elections. And again, the implementation deficit is the issue that has to change.
Jimmy, that's a mouthful.
It's interesting though. I think there are things that, very simple recommendations that don't necessarily require constitutional amendment or anything of that nature. But I think one of the what both panelists have said that I want to touch on is the issue of distrust. There is always that issue. There can sometimes be that issue. I shouldn't say always, but there cannot sometimes be the issue of distrust. But it usually comes when the population doesn't agree with the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think OAS needed to tell people in St. Kitts and Nevis that the voting and counting process takes too long. Mm-hmm. We all agree that. So we all agree with that. So I don't think that in relation to that aspect or the inequity between the constituencies, I don't think anybody had to really come and tell us that. Mm-hmm. We know this, we feel it, we've said it. When you look at especially like a constituency like number 8, you're talking Half Moon, still Keon, still Monkey Hill. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy. And I think it really requires us to just sit down and figure out what's going to be the process for us to address these issues. Mm-hmm. There are perhaps some very low-hanging fruit that we can deal with very quickly, and there are some others that may take a bit more engagement with the public and the law and the Constitution and all these different things. But there are some things that we really need to look into if it's a matter of, for example, looking at regional experiences where we saw Grenada by 9 o'clock, they knew the results.
Mm-hmm. And the polls close at 6, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
wow.
what did they do in Grenada that we're not doing?
Mm-hmm.
It might just be a simple PM. Mm-hmm. What you do? something. I mean, not to simplify it like that, and I'm sure
Yeah,
it will
yeah,
be
yeah.
more official and formal. But just saying that it may just be a fact-finding mission that might be necessary, observing, sharing of information. These kind of things we really need to encourage. But I do agree with the point of educating the public and giving them insight into why things are the way they are, so that it can help them even form their own recommendations as to what we could do.
Could I jump in just to add one thing in response
Sure, go ahead.
in response to both Jihan and Abel. In response to what Jihan said about the process by which we sit down and we look at our electoral process and we make the changes that we need to make. We figure out whether or not it's something simple, something complex. We take into consideration the recommendations, and also to what Abel said about other issues of constitutional reform, electoral reform that may require a little more legal work, broader consultation. I want to accept all of that as being true, but I also want to caution against sort of giving our political leaders and our elected officials too much rope. I personally find that politicians find the time to do what they choose to
Amen.
do. They find the money to spend on the initiatives that they think are important initiatives. They involve themselves in various controversies from time to time where members of the public will raise an eyebrow and say, why did we spend so much money on that? Or, why was this such a major priority that you put so much energy into it? But when it comes to the reform of our democratic systems, improving the way that the electoral system works, improving the accountability of parliament, improving the capacity of government to audit itself, whether through the Office of Audit, Director of Audit, improving the capacity of government to probe, or the capacity of the police and law enforcement agencies to probe malfeasance and corruption. When it comes to all of these things, it's slow and it's grinding, and we got to consult, and we got to change the constitution, and we got to do this, and we got to do that, and
I totally agree. Standing ovation over here.
I have to agree with Kieran on that. It's for me, it has to do with the public holding the officials accountable to get the necessary change implemented. Because you can't come to me in 2010 and tell me, hey, we're going to change the boundaries, we're going to change this. Then in 2015, you campaign on changing the boundaries and you're changing the electoral process. And then in 2020, you promise to change the boundaries and the electoral process. In 2022, you promise to change the boundaries and the electoral process. In 2027, you promise to change the boundaries and the electoral process. And then I'm going to get great-grandkids, and we're still trying to change the boundaries and the electoral process. So the point is, the public in general has to hold officials accountable. But also on the flip side to that, education is key, because, we keep talking about electronic voting and all of that. Whatever change is implemented, the public has to buy into it. And you have to get the confidence of the public, because you might say, oh, we start counting as of the 2027 election. We're going to begin counting the ballots at each at each voting station. Then you hear the public is going to come out to say, oh, so what about if they do this? And what about if they do that? And what if they do the other? All you're trying to do is make changes for the process to run smoother. So I think in all of this, education has to be, you have to begin to roll out that education process to have people to buy into it, even long before the next elections.
Do you guys think it's just a conversation that is politically expedient, where they would come and say, we're going to change the boundaries, or we're going to make electoral reform, on the top of our list of priorities? Because as German rightly said, we've been hearing about this for some time on the campaign trail, where political parties have been saying that they're going to do this in terms of electoral reform. And here we are again. Another general election came and went, and we've not seen much happen. So it's back to what I said earlier. My simple comment on it is that it's sad. It's really, really sad. And I'll say it again that I do hope that this administration would take it very seriously because, as you said, Jihan, we don't need the OAS to, not that they can't, but we don't need the OAS to come and say, guys, all you're taking too long to count the ballots. It's something that we
They've
know
said
here.
what we've been saying. Yes,
Right.
yes.
So, I mean, if the OAS is saying this, the people on the ground are saying this, then what are we doing? When you look at the report, it also speaks about advanced and special voting. The report says that the National Assembly Elections Act currently has no provisions for advanced voting by poll workers and members of the security forces. The mission was informed that the amendment that allowed advanced voting in the 2015 election was repealed, given concerns that it might allow the choices of those voters to be known. There are also no provisions in the act for electors to vote in places other than their designated polling place, including citizens residing overseas, patients in hospitals or nursing homes, or qualified incarcerated persons. As a consequence, voters whose names appear on the voters list but are unable to attend their designated polling place on election day are not able to cast their vote. I when I read this about the advanced voting with the choices of those voters being known, I honestly did not know that was the reason why it was repealed.
And in my honest opinion, I think that was a very futile reason to repeal it, because if your concern is that, and it happened where you heard 8 votes were cast before and 8 were in favor of one party, so all 8 people who voted that, then don't announce it. Just include it in and the report did say that. Actually intermix it within the other reports. Why are you announcing the people who voted early voted this? It was a simple fix that did not require the entire provision to be repealed. It really wasn't necessary.
Because I think in Grenada they had, I think it was Grenada or St. Lucia, they had advanced polling. Grenada, yes. And they mixed the results. So all of the results were released the night of the election. So if you had 15 people voted the day before, then we won't know who they voted for, which is fair.
It's sense. I totally agree with that recommendation, because you want to make sure that your security forces and your poll workers are free to focus on their duties of the day. So that I did not agree with it when it was repealed, and I hope that it finds its way back into the legislation.
I think it's necessary too, because we were on the ground at the different polling stations, and we saw polling clerks rushing back and forth to go to vote. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah,
this is absolutely ridiculous. And I think that creates more distrust, because you're like, well, who's going to be doing your job while you're gone? And who's going to be doing that job while you're gone, Yeah. But these are simple things that I really think can be fixed. But I don't know. I don't want to... some may say it's harsh, but is it a case that we're like, well, this is how we've been doing it for 10, 15, 20 years, so we're going to stick like this and we're going to do it forever and ever, amen, until German gets grandchildren.
How is this 20-year situation working for us? It's not. It's not working. So why are we continuing to hold fast to this system that's obviously not working?
Yeah, German, go ahead.
The issue is, and it goes back to a comment I think Hiron made as well as yourself. The fact is, why would you change something that's not broken for you? If
Oh, for you,
Kieran
okay.
wins an elections and he
Thank
wins a
you.
landslide, why would Kieran come in and
Thank
change the
you.
process?
Thank you.
But it's not.
Right?
It's not working though.
It's
Not
not
for
working for
them.
It's
people,
not.
but
It's
But it's
not.
Jihan,
working for
Okay.
me. It's
exactly.
working for me.
Jihan, that is the problem,
And that
right?
is
That's the
our
key
problem.
word,
Our
Jihan.
problem.
No,
Working for you.
No, but I understand that, which is another reason why I think that it will be made a priority for this current administration,
Right.
because now you have the capabilities to assuage and mold and put things how you want it in your favor, and we all know that any government who has the opportunity to do that is going to do it in their favor.
Right.
So you have that opportunity to do it. So let's just get that part done then.
I
Yeah,
think,
we all understand it will be done in your favor. We get it, but just
I
do
think,
it. Just do it, and let's stop working
I,
on
I
boundaries
think,
that were there since 1983.
Yeah, Kieran?
I think, I think the issue of the efficiency of the counting process is not something which specifically um, might impact a politician in terms of, do I want to change this or not change this? At the end of the day, the votes are ultimately counted. I mean, it may be inefficient that they count it into the night, but the votes are counted. So it may not be something that they're looking to hold on to because it has any particular benefit for them. But outside of that, that's just one specific thing. Outside of that, there are aspects of the way that our electoral system works. And I don't want to jump the gun, but the report does speak to the issue of political finance. And it is a common theme throughout reports on every Caribbean island that the issue of campaign financing is highly unregulated. And there are other aspects of how our electoral and political system works that benefit an incumbent. It benefits an incumbent government. And so what you find is that, and I know you most likely experience this again across the Caribbean, when a government is in opposition, when a party is in opposition, the name of the game is reform. Constitutional reform, legal reform. They say the government should change the constitution. The government should make parliament more democratic. The government should pass campaign finance rules. The government should improve the Integrity in Public Life Act. The government should create an independent special corruption prosecution unit. When they get into power, well, that's a different story entirely, because they are now being asked to regulate themselves. And I think example has shown us that the hardest thing for politicians to do is to regulate their own activity, is to regulate the level of power or the level of freedom or the level of leeway which they are allowed to have. They will invariably choose to give themselves the entire rope.
And that is correct. But one other thing I don't think that was mentioned in the report, Devon, and we heard this coming out of the 2020 general elections, which had to do with recount. We were not in there, but that was one of the issues they said that held up the process. My contention is you should come to the public and say, Jermaine got 1,001 votes. Kieran got 987, and Jihan got 1,005. Then you can challenge for a recount, not saying, oh, I don't like this number and something is not correct. Recount the box. That in and of itself creates the bottleneck. Why people have to wait 24, 48 hours before, in a society that has way less than Trinidad, way less than Guyana, way less than Jamaica, probably less than Barbados, less than Antigua, and we still have to wait on this happening. And the general thing is we do not ever get 100% voter turnout. Right. So at some point we must begin to put the strict laws and operate by the laws that are on the books when it comes to an electoral process. I want to go back to one thing you were saying, Devon. You talk about from the recommendation that concern about people who were hospitalized and all of them who
Yeah, I actually wanted to
put
touch
systems in
that.
place for them to vote. This was highlighted, and not only in St. Kitts, but this was a concern that was highlighted across the Caribbean that had elections during the pandemic. What happens to those people who came down with COVID-19? What mechanism would be in place for them to cast their ballots? And I don't think any territory across the region was able to put proper mechanisms in place for those people to cast their ballots. For example, we know, let's say constituency one, for example, based on the last, not the current elections, but 2015, we see one vote can make a difference in a constituency,
Oh yeah.
right? How do you tell somebody that you cannot exercise your legal right to cast a ballot because you're stuck with COVID? It's simple. Either you have some mechanism where you go to them and have them cast their votes, or you have someone do it as a proxy for them. So this way now, you solve all of the problems that you're literally seeing developing. And it's a really good point that the OAS recommendation would have made. Going back to the issue of early voting, I support early voting because, on election day, there was this running laughter about what if all the immigration officers decided we're going to vote no. Are we going to leave the flights on the tarmac until all the immigration officers return? I mean, let's be frank. Or if the doctors who's supposed to be doing surgery say, hey, we need to go cast our ballots. And then you're in a long line, and then the other doctors decide, okay, let's go. Then what happens? These are, things that may not necessarily be realistic, but you have to take into considerations plan A, plan B, plan C. And even for us as journalists, that was a concern that someone brought to our attention. What happens when you have to be out in the road, driving from police stations and providing updates and all that? Then what happens?
I just wanted to add, Jermaine, that sorry not to cut you off. Well, for us here, it wasn't really well. For Yolanda and I, as you know, we voted Nevis, and the lines weren't long in Nevis, but for our colleagues on St. Kitts, they stood in the lines forever and ever, amen, because the lines were so long, and
well, it depends
you still
on
had
where
work
you
to do.
Yeah, it depends
True.
on where you were.
But yeah, that wasn't really an issue for us on the Nevis end because the lines weren't long. But I wanted to go into here where it speaks to the advance and special voting, where it says that there are no provisions in the Act for electors to vote in places other than their designating polling place, where it says including citizens residing overseas. Now, this continues to be a major talking point about overseas voters and people coming here. And for the most part, everyone has this I don't even know how to describe it, but they don't believe in people coming here to vote and leaving the next day. In having the conversation with a number of people, I have come to the conclusion that they don't necessarily have an issue with people coming home to vote. They have an issue with how they get here. So, in other words, they're like, no political party should be doing any plane loads of people or anything like that for them to come home to vote. If you want to come to vote, then you should come on your own and all of that. And then there were people trying to suggest that, well, the overseas voters benefited one party, and some people even went as far as to say that, well, I know of a party who ain't had any overseas voters. I'm telling you, well, how do you know that? Right? But yeah, absentee ballots. I mean, you can't tell me that because you're not in the country you can't vote, or because, as Jeremy said, you have COVID, you can't vote, or you're in a nursing home, you can't vote. Those predicaments or circumstances, they shouldn't prevent you from exercising your constitutional right.
I agree. I think that those are issues. There are people who live overseas who perhaps are even more vested and interested
Oh my
in
gosh.
than people who live here.
I keep saying that.
Because there are people who live here who chose not to vote.
Not
They
to
don't
vote.
want to participate.
Yeah.
That's their right to make that decision, as opposed to somebody who is in the US and waiting to hear the date because they know they have to put in their vacation form and they know they have to come home because they want to participate. So I don't think that people should be barred from voting because they're overseas or they find themselves in circumstances that can't be helped, like if they're sick or in the nursing home, then you said. So those sorts of things I think have to be taken into account and consideration be made for them to cast their ballot. We will, I think, have those issues of security of the vote because of the ballots, because then you don't want somebody to say, oh, who got they throw the ballots them in the bush, or they put in some more or something like that. You don't want those kind of allegations to have root at all.
boy.
So you're going to have to put whatever checks and balances in place to make sure that you let people understand, the public understand that it is a sacred process, and we're going to do everything that's necessary to ensure that the integrity of the decision, the people's will, is secured.
Guys, let's take a short break, and when we come back, we'll keep the conversation flowing. Let's hit this break. We'll be right back.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. WINN FM. Found the sound. 98.9. WINN FM. WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is WINN FM.
People make the world go round.
Yes? Jean, body spray's hot, boy. I can't take it. Well, it's a good thing I called. The TDC Home and Building Depots are having their Cool 'em Down sale with 20% discount on fans, AC units, coolers, fridges, and more to beat this heat, girl. Girl, Betty, you're making joke. No, so stop sweating and let's go to the store now.
Ooh, you come pick me up, because may want to miss this sale at TDC Home and Building Depot.
Yeah, man. And don't forget you can also shop online too, using shoptdcgroup.com.
Cool.
Terms and conditions apply. See stores for details.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects or sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
All right, welcome back to Inside the News here on WINN FM 98.9. I'm your host for today, Devon Cornelius. It is 10 minutes past the hour. We'll wrap up this program at 1:30. Jehan, there was something that you said that stuck with me, and something that I've been saying over and over and over again as it relates to overseas voters, where people believe, well, you don't live here, so you can't vote. Absolute. Sorry, my phone is here talking to me. People who believe that because you don't live in St. Kitts and Nevis, or because you don't reside in St. Kitts and Nevis, you should not be allowed to vote. You do have people who they don't live here, but they make a very significant contribution to the country's development. They are part of what we do. When you see donations coming in for areas like health and education, you have the overseas, these diaspora groups, they're the ones who are out there promoting St. Kitts and Nevis. Meanwhile, which is your right, you have people who hear the opportunity is given to them and like, oh, I'm not going to vote. But you who did not vote, found an issue or find an issue with people who are coming home to vote, same people who are making a contribution. One may want to make the argument that you have those who just come the day they vote because they got a plane ticket from somebody and they leave. Fair enough, I understand. My recommendation to fix all of that, in terms of and I wish we were able to get onto political finance, but what I would suggest is the absentee ballot. But then again, you have the issues of security, and you don't want those allegations to come that, well, somebody rigged the process and all of that. So I don't think it is impossible, but as long as it is on the priority list and people know what they're doing, I don't really foresee an issue with it. Jihan, what is your take?
I think that whatever we decide we want to do, we'll find a way to get it done. I think it was Kieran who said that, or Jermaine, I can't remember. But in terms of if we want it, yes, if we want it done, it's going to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find a way.
Yeah.
It just depends on the level of political will.
Yeah. Kieran?
I would say briefly that it's a complex issue for me. It's not something I've grappled with before. And I do understand the passions on either side because I'll say this. I think what needs to happen is that, yes, persons, I think, ought to be able to cast their ballots even if they don't live, let's say, permanently in the country, but that needs to come with caveats. That just can't be a carte blanche. I think Parliament, as is the purpose of Parliament, political parties need to agree on certain stipulations, regulations, just like we have certain eligibility requirements for you to vote, certain eligibility requirements for citizens who are overseas if they are to vote. Mm-hmm. Because you can understand the apprehension people have. Let us say that I was a citizen of Antigua and Barbuda, born in Antigua and Barbuda, and I left Antigua and Barbuda at some age, and I never returned. I have no family there. I don't do nothing. But guess what? A political party came by. They said, "Hey, partner, we will give you some money," and that's what they do. We will give you some money to come back and vote. In fact, you could have a vacation here if you want to. And I say, "Hey, sure, that sounds fantastic," and I just go and I get registered and I go and vote. There has to be something wrong with that. But then at the same time, as small Caribbean islands, we actually have massive diasporas overseas of people who come and go. They have family, they have relatives, they follow issues, they send money, they take part, they're involved in civil organizations, sometimes more than persons who are actually here. Mm-hmm. And the idea that those persons cannot participate simply because they are, they're living and residing overseas, maybe they're raising a family overseas, even though they're coming and going, they have family, they have connections, they're making contributions. The idea that they can't participate is, a little bit ridiculous. So one has to find the right set of criteria to determine who overseas can participate. And one more thing I'll say on the issue, why I believe it is so controversial is for what I said before, which is that we have these large diasporas. Because we are developing nations and because we are islands, we actually have diasporas overseas so large that they can actually affect the outcome. Massive countries like the United States and where the majority of U.S. citizens live in the U.S. I shouldn't say the majority, because the majority of our citizens live in our countries too. But the fraction of persons who live outside of the country who could affect the outcome of an election is much smaller for larger countries. With us, we have such a large diaspora of our citizens outside that their participation does have an actual impact. So that, let's say if we only had two diaspora, if Antigua only had two diaspora citizens outside, it'd say, hey, let them vote, who cares? It's 2 out of how many thousand voting. But if it's thousands of them, then we really start to consider the question. It becomes controversial, who should be allowed to? Because as I say, political parties do have the tendency of sending a plane out. Interestingly, when Dominica has elections, they actually campaign in Antigua because of, no, seriously. I remember that when Dominica has elections, they campaign in Antigua because of how the inter-regional diaspora works, and they will send planes.
Yeah, you do have. I know of politicians who travel overseas to campaign.
U.S., UK, St. Martin, Angola. Yeah,
go to campaign because you do have a lot of people from St. Kitts and Nevis who reside in those countries. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to ask a question that I don't know if many of you can agree with it, but what is the issue of the overseas vote deciding the outcome here on the ground?
What do you mean?
I think it was Kieran. I don't know if you understand where I'm coming from, but it was Kieran who made the point that you have large diaspora. You have a large diaspora where you have a lot of people from St. Kitts and Nevis or Antigua, whatever the country is, overseas. Let's say we have, I don't know, about 5,000 people coming in to vote for the elections. And you have a situation where it is because of that vote, they were able to influence the outcome of the election, whether somebody lost or somebody won the election. Some make the argument that that should not be the case, and they don't believe that it was a level playing field because one party had the upper hand and the other party had to depend on the people on the ground. At the end of the day, we are all the very same people. We are all citizens eligible to vote, whether you are in the air, on the ground, in a hospital, in a nursing home. So my question really is, what is the issue whether your strength is in the air or on the ground? I guess that's my question.
I guess people feel like the ones who have to live it and deal with it every day, drive on the roads that the politicians are not paying attention to, or go to the hospital that the politicians are not paying attention to, whatever the issue is, because we're here and we have to live it every day. Persons perhaps feel slighted that somebody who doesn't have as much connection ultimately has decided the fate for those of us who have to live it.
But I do believe that for those who reside overseas, they in a sense live it too, because you have people who reside overseas who sustain households here, who even though
it's not the same.
It's not the same.
It's not the same. The levels are very, very much.
It's more, well, it's direct if you actually live here, and it's more indirect if you're not here.
Yeah,
Right.
if you get
Fair
sick
enough.
and you have to go to the hospital, I have to go to the hospital that's here. If you get sick, you go to your hospital wherever you are, and you send a card and some money, and you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you're sick." It's very different. Yes.
Sure, Kieran, go ahead.
I'll be brief because I don't think Abel is coming on this question yet. But I'll just say that it is a legitimate concern. It is a legitimate concern because you have members of your diaspora who act differently. Some are involved. Some are really vested, regardless of which slant they may take with like this party, like that party. They are vested. But then you have others who are not so vested. And so you wonder to yourself whether those persons could be leaned on simply to come and make a decision, which is not a decision that they took from a position of really being vested and understanding and relying on the experiences of the persons who are there, their family members, and sort of keeping track of what's going on. It's not because of that. It's because somebody got to them and said, hey, why don't you just come and do this and we'll give you a benefit. And we have to face the reality that political parties do that. And then also the other issue is that in terms of the opportunity to come and vote, you run into this peculiarity with the diaspora because not everybody can afford the plane ticket, and not all parties have the same amount of money to pay to send for the people who can't afford a plane ticket. So I may run a political party, and I may have 10,000 people in Florida who want to come and vote for me, but I'm broke, and I can't pay for them to get in. My opponent has 5,000 people in Florida who want to vote for him, but he's rolling in money. And he just sends the charter planes up there. They come down, they bring them back, they come, they vote. And my guys are sitting up in Florida saying, well, we couldn't vote because we're broke.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. But I have a more controversial question, though. How do we know that the parties actually pay for these flights? That's from me.
We don't.
That's my point.
We don't. And not to cut you off, Jermaine, but going back to what I said earlier, where people were saying, well, I know of a party that didn't bring. I said, well, how you know that? So we don't know who pay for what. We don't know how many people come for which party. We assume.
Unless people talk. That's
But
it.
people lie.
No, people
To-
could
to-
no, but people
to-
could
to make
people
you say
could talk
something.
and say, well, that's true, because you could say, well,
Actually, this is a good point in terms of campaign finance, because you should have laws on the book that say that if any member of a party, agent of a party, person working, in relation to a party is going to finance tickets or travel expenses for persons for the purpose of voting, that must be declared, and if it is not declared, it is a crime and they will be punished.
Exactly. That's
German,
the
go
point I
ahead.
was actually getting at. But to respond to the question specifically, I have 2 points. One, it's going to be a little bit controversial because I know people in the diaspora would criticize and say that they should not be. But for me, I believe that if you're going to vote and still continue to vote and you live in the diaspora, because as Kieran rightly said, you can't have somebody who went away for 50 years and they basically a citizen of that specific country that they're living in, that they're still making a determination for the person who lives on the ground. I'm not against it, but I'm just saying that I believe that some level of tax should be paid or something of that nature in order for contribution to still be made to the direct functioning of the country. Secondly, when it comes to the diaspora voting, if we don't do it that way, then do we still keep them in the specific constituency that they lived in before they left? One, and two, I believe that one of either the High Commission or the embassy in that specific country should be the one that is conducting the poll or the voting at the time of the election. So you go to the embassy or the High Commission, the box is closed, sealed, and early voting closes X date. So the boxes are then shipped to the country in general. And then on elections day or elections night, you just open the boxes and you make the determination, whichever constituency, and you just communicate. Or as the OES recommended, have some electronic means by which the information can be inputted and then disseminated across the entire spectrum.
assuming current doesn't go. That's the other. Everything has a, that extra consideration that we'll always have to make. Somebody will say, "Oh yes, electronic voting," but then they'll say security and cyber breaches and then electricity and Wi-Fi drop, and it's so many different things, and they are very, very complex issues, and I actually think that's why we're not going to see significant change, because it's so complex and there won't necessarily be consensus on many of these areas because of the political divide and the fact that politicians and the political parties have benefited from some of these institutions and processes and procedures that for years. So I think because of the complexity is one of the reasons why we haven't seen much change.
What you don't want, as you said earlier, Jihan, is for you get to a stage where people start to, make these serious allegations that the process wasn't as transparent as it should be. That's something that you can't deal with, or you don't want to deal with in a small. Fair point.
Let us look at the 2022 general elections. We heard that there was a fire the night before elections. No such thing happened. Then you hear all manner of whatever after. It's going to happen regardless of whatever means and changes you implement. So my thing is, implement it and let us deal with whatever issues that may arise after. Because as we all know, change is inevitable, and we must be able to find the weaknesses within the systems that we implemented.
I would also add to that very briefly by saying I wanted to pull up a point that Abel had made much earlier, which was that you do need that you do need to communicate with the public before you change something.
Right.
And especially when it's something fundamental to do with the way people vote. It doesn't matter if it would seem to be an obviously positive change, because any change to these sorts of critical systems is going to arouse suspicion immediately. Why are they changing the voting system? Why are they changing the voting regulation? So you have to engage before. So I think that, that obviously is something that needs to be done, and our politicians are not unaccustomed to engaging with the public. They simply choose when they want to engage with the public. When it's prior to election, they engage with the public every single day of the week. So if we want to get some voting laws changed, well, you could engage with the public one day a week about that.
Right.
Do a little campaign. You run a political campaign for weeks and months before an election. You get out and you talk to people about all kind of issues. Just this one little issue you could get out and talk about for maybe a couple of days, maybe 2 months or so, and then you take the law to parliament.
So basically, it's gaining the trust of the electorate first.
I think so too. I think, and goes back to what I was saying. There may be some low hanging fruit that we can attack first, and then incrementally deal with the bigger ones.
Mm-hmm.
Education is yes, in the whole elections process, whether or not you change it or you don't change it, education is critical at this juncture, because we're in the 21st century. No way should I continue to just stand up in a line for 3-4 hours in a small population, a small environment, to mark an X on a piece of paper, and then it takes me another day. I could travel from St. Kitts to England and come back, and you still can't tell me who win.
Oh wow!
Just saying, no, it's true.
It's true
because I'm sure a lot of people were on a flight from England or matter of fact, they left Antigua to go to the UK, and then even when they finished voting and all of that, they came back.
Well, German, one of our panelists actually was traveling the night of the election, and they got home, got settled in, and we still didn't know who won the election. So
my point exactly, Devon. But one thing I want to add, though, is that one of the issues and one of the things that was highlighted with the lack of overseas voting is that we sent a number of individuals overseas to represent St. Kitts and Nevis. I think we had a few at the Commonwealth Games, we had a few elsewhere in a couple of international tournaments. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure these guys and gals were able to exercise their duty, right, in terms of marking the X or whatever it is. So things like these you have to take into consideration. That's why the US, for example, have the early voting process, and absentee ballots and the military voting and all those big sexy language to say, we can give you a piece of paper to vote early. Simple.
Guys, we are out of time. It's 11:30. I feel like it's
1:30.
It's 1:30. Oh my gosh! Maybe that's
you want
me.
2 more hours.
I want more. But it feels like we just came here. It's 1:30, and so we're gonna have to bring this program to a close. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, because I believe you guys are all busy people. Thank you so much for being here.
And I would just like to say I enjoyed the commentary. I recognized the voices of the panelists. I was listening here at WINN FM on election night. So yes.
Great. Thank you. But let me just get some closing comments. Kieran?
Well, thank you, of course, for having me this afternoon. I think reform is really important, and I think that it reform in terms of our democracy, our elections, and I'll go further to say the way our political institutions function, our public service, our cabinet, our parliament. These things are not things which continuously need to sit on a shelf, sit in a report. These are things which need to be acted on by political leaders, but the nature of political leaders and elected politicians is that they don't do a very good job of regulating themselves and changing the rules that affect the amount of power and that they have. So it has to be a citizen process where through our media, through our academia, through our pressure groups, through our citizen organizations, we continuously demand that they make these changes. And when they don't, eject them.
German?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Devon. You have lunch and breakfast for me all in one. So yes. Um, I support what Kiran said, but for me, we have to begin the education process right now. We all, and the public in general, know what the gripes are surrounding elections, electoral reform, or what is needed, right? So we need to begin to educate and tell the people, hey, within the next year, year and a half, 2 years, these are some of what we want to see, because a consensus has been had from the campaign that electoral reform, constitutional reform is needed. So if you don't start the groundwork now and begin to reach out to the public and have consultations on what their recommendations are, sorry to say, but realistically, we might have the same panel again in 2027 discussing the same topic again, and then hopefully not the elections after that. We'll be here again discussing the same thing. So the point is we need to begin the groundwork now to get the process on the way and solve some of the issues that continually repeat themselves over and over again. So
Yeah, Jihan.
Yes, I think excellent discussion. Clearly, this could go on for so many more hours, and we will never ever really get to consensus on what should happen and where we should go. What we are all certain on, I think, is that change is it has to happen. It has to come. And I will reiterate what I said earlier in relation to nothing will happen unless it becomes a priority. And it's my hope that this new administration will make this electoral reform a priority.
All right, thank you so much.
Could I jump in very quickly? One thing I would say,
Yes.
I think as media persons, and that's in response to Abel, I think, and this is in relation to all of us, I think as persons in the media, we are sort of at the forefront of realizing how often the same issues are spoken about over and over and over again. It's something that personally happens to me when producing a show, that I think to myself, didn't we discuss this last year? Didn't we discuss this year before that? Didn't we discuss this year before that? Didn't I have the same panel to talk about this? Didn't we give the same recommendations to fix these issues? So I know how you guys feel.
All right. Guys, thank you again so much, and hope to have this conversation. We're not this conversation because we're hoping that things will change, but hoping to see you guys back in the studios here at WINN FM. You guys take care and enjoy the rest of your Saturday. This has been another edition of Inside the News right here on WINN FM 98.9. Take care.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9.